Good evening, everybody, and welcome to some stat check bonus content. This week is a tournament player's guide to Grey Knights. I'm going to be breaking down the entire Grey Knight book and all of its subsidiary rules. We're going to be talking about what's good, what's not, why it's good, why it's not, and what you should be thinking about, whether you're playing against it or with it, whatever the direction is that you are taking around Grey Knights. This is a new book that is coming out into the scene. It is dropping, I'm not going to say dropping hot, but it is dropping into the scene, and it's a thing that you need to be thinking about if you're attending tournaments right now. So whether you are looking to get a bit better at Grey Knights to play them yourselves, whether you're playing against them, or whether you're just looking to get a little bit better at your club, hopefully this will behoove you well on your journey to understanding Grey Knights, what they do, and what you should be expecting from them at the competitive level. If this is your first time with StatCheck, thank you so much for joining us. This is the first of a new series of us doing a sort of 1 month in Codex reviews. So we're aiming to kind of use some of the StatCheck data that we've gathered over the past couple of weeks to talk about what they're doing well at, what their win rates are, what detachments are doing well, and also run through a couple of lists now that we've got a bit of detail on exactly how Grey Knights are performing in tournaments. That is very much where we're at today. So yeah, please bear with us. We're expecting to run this for about an hour. So yeah, settle down and let's get into it. And let's start off with the army rules. The army rule for Grey Knights is Gate of Infinity. Now, this is a super cool, super powerful army rule, and it's definitely where a lot of the power budget of Grey Knights exists, right? Like the ability to, at the end of each of your opponent's fight phases, pick 3 units that are not in engagement range and have this ability, which is everything except basically vehicles or non-Psyker vehicles. So this is your everything except your Land Raiders, Razorback, Storm Ravens, etc. So Dread Knights, Infantry, Terminators, Dreadnoughts even can all get picked up with this rule, and it lets you just put them into strategic reserve. And that means because almost all of those data sheets, I believe all those data sheets have the Deep Strike rule, they are able to then set up anywhere outside 9 of your opponent at the end of any of your reinforcement steps. Now, this rule gives you the ability to be incredibly dynamic across the table. You can take units in one area of the board and move them to another with incredible speed. As long as you've maintained some amount of board control, you can basically have the game playing out wherever you want it to be. Your units that were crushing one side of the board can suddenly come back and support your efforts to defend your expansion objective or do a secondary or anything in that space, right? Like this gives you a ton of ability to control the board. Traditionally, this kind of rule is better for shooting units than it is for melee units because it lets you drop in and shoot at 9 inches of pretty much anything, right? Anything that's on the frontier of your opponent's army, you can drop in and shoot it and create that space. And you don't have to rely on rolling any dice to be allowed to shoot, right? Obviously, you still have to roll dice to shoot, but generally, you get to shoot regardless. For melee units, this is typically a little bit weaker because you then have to roll a 9-inch charge in order to be able to use your unit at all. That's a 28% chance of just under a 50% if you're going to throw a CP reroll at it. And, you know, you're never upset with the ability to do that. It's definitely a thing that you'll do occasionally. Your unit will just come up because it's not doing anything else. With Gate Infinity, you'll drop it down, you'll throw a 9-inch charge. You'll be like, it's behind a wall if it fails, if it's in your face if it passes. I'm okay with either side of this equation, and you'll go for that. But the change to it that happened with the new 10th edition codex is that you can go into strategic reserve now. This previously used to be you went into reserve and you came down at the end of your next movement phase. Now, because it's strategic reserve, you're allowed to stay in reserve as long as you want, which means that you can either, wait till past turn 3 beyond the normal reserve limit, and you can come in turn 4, turn 5, or you can rapid ingress with it now. And that's a really big change for the melee pieces of this army, where you can now go, well, I don't need to use this turn. There's no secondary card that I've drawn that says I need to go and do this thing or do that thing. So I'm just going to hold it in reserve and I'm going to threaten a rapid ingress, which you can then do beyond turn 3, 4, 5, or into turn 3, 4, 5, which is not something that traditional armies can do, right? It's a very unique selling point of this army is that your melee pieces can be incredibly threatening out of nowhere, right? Like the ability to rapid ingress somewhere your opponent can't deal with and then walk forward and charge a key unit, take an objective, flip some primary, whatever you need to do, right? Like rapid ingress is such a powerful tool, and this army supports that really well with its durable pieces that are able to come up and down and off the board. And then if you need them, you can just use them. You pick up your strike squad, you look at it, and you're like, well, if I draw any of the positional secondaries, I can throw it for that. And if I don't, well, then there's nothing else for me to do with it this turn. I can just hold it, and then next turn you can either threaten to rapid ingress onto a primary objective, scoring points, rapid ingress and heroic intervention, or attack your opponent. You could play a bunch of flamers in like a purgation squad to rapid ingress down and Overwatch, right? All these kind of things that give you some really, really cool and dynamic tools all stem from this ability. Now, one thing to be aware of, because this is an ability that triggers at the end of your opponent's turn, it will not do anything if you go first. traditionally what that means for Grey Knights is that they're an army that excels at going second because they have so much ability to play a slower game, right? If you go second, you can pick your units up on your turn one and then immediately start using them because they deployed on the table. They're allowed to set up using the Deep Strike rule. They wouldn't be able to use natural strat reserve, but they can use the Deep Strike rule on their data sheet to set up instead, and you can drop your Dread Knights in and start shooting and scoring secondaries and playing the game immediately, applying pressure to your opponent. However, when you go first, that's not an option, right? You are just playing with your natural data sheets as they are on the table, and then eventually you'll get to pick them up, but for the time being, they are stuck where they are. What that does mean for Grey Knights is that you often want to be careful about not indexing too hard into going second. The Chapter Approved 2025 pack has a small bias towards going second. I believe the sort of general trending win rates is somewhere between 52 and 55% per mission, with a couple of exceptions. The going second is broadly stronger. This pack, challenger cards, endgame scoring, the ability to just be reactive to your opponent are traditionally stronger at the moment. And Grey Knights doubles down on that by saying, and if you go second, you get an extra turn of your army roll and you get it sooner. So you need to be very careful when you're building and planning out with Grey Knights that you don't over-index into the go second plan at the expense of the going first plan. And one of the things that when we're going through detachments and data sheets that we'll be prioritizing is tools that are happy to go first, because something that lets you go first and do something is better than something that is just like, well, this is even better if you go second, but you're just going to lose 50% of your games for showing up, right? So a very strong thing to consider is stuff like Scout, turn one fast moving models, abilities that work better on turn one. Anything like that is the kind of thing that we are considering for power sources in this detachment. Now, to kind of generally talk on the Grey Knights army strengths, most of the stuff in this book has a 2-up save, and that's a really, really powerful tool to have, right? 2-up saves benefit better from cover than 3-up saves do because they get it against, and because saves are exponential in that sense, right? The more saves you take, the more saves you pass, the more saves you can pass in the future. And broadly, most of the Grey Knights army is strength 6 damage 2 in combat for its infantry, which when you're talking about the equivalent of intercessors, also being 2-up save and having 15 attacks at 6/2/2 in melee, you are genuinely looking at a very, very, very high power level for the basic infantry in this army, and they pay a cost for that. Nothing is cheap in this army. Your 3 units that you pick up will often represent a decent chunk of your fighting force in your army every turn, because you're probably going to have somewhere in the region of 10 to 12 units in a Grey Knight army, right? I would not generally expect to have significantly more than that. Maybe like 15 if you were really stretching it. And when we talk about some of the sample lists later, we'll have a look at that unit count. But generally, you'll find that most armies in this book are not super like unit dense. So you're not going to be picking up lots of garbage. You're not picking up 45 points unit here. The cheapest thing you're picking up with this is a solo character that might be 65 points that's left from a unit for like a chaplain, maybe a solo librarian at 80 points, that kind of space. Or it's a unit that costs over 100 points, right? You are picking up genuinely real value with this, which means that you do want to be careful about making sure you're getting, good units into the fray, playing through rapid ingress, playing for those charges, playing for shooting more so than you are for combat, unless you're planning on rapid ingressing, which does add, more CP expenditure if you're planning on being melee presence with this. So again, it does lean us towards looking at shooting assets and the things that don't need this. It also does put demands on your primary holding, right? If you don't necessarily have a unit on your primary to hold the objective after you teleport away, you're not going to score that objective, with the exception of some detachments that we'll touch on later and some data sheets that we'll touch on later. So yeah, just some things to keep in mind. Gave Infinity, super powerful army rule. We're very happy to have it. It returns in basically unchanged form from the Codex, but with almost just pure upside. Okay, now let's talk about our first detachment, which is Augurium Task Force. Now, this is a detachment that's focused around mobility shenanigans, I think is probably the easiest way to describe it. It gives you more flexibility on your teleports and your Game Infinity rules, and that's super cool. So the basic premise of it is the detachment rule lets you, if you did not pick up the maximum units, which is 2, 3, or 4, depending on which size of game you're taking, we're going to assume that everyone's playing Strike Force because that's the traditional level the tournaments are playing, which is 2,000 points, which is 3 units. So if you picked up 0, 1, or 2 units with your Game Infinity last turn, in your command at the start of your movement phase, you can then use that lift now. So it lets you do some things where you can hold an objective for primary and then lift your unit off, which is great, right? That kind of helps with some of those problems. You can sticky an objective with Strike Marines with their objective secured ability. You can draw your cards and recognize that, oh, actually, I have engaged in all fronts this turn and I really need to get something back there. Okay, I'll pick that unit up that I wasn't sure I wanted to or not, right? Or I'll pick up this unit that is better at that than this is, right? If maybe you had a Dread Knight and a Strike Squad, you wanted to pick up one of them, but not sure which one. And if there was no card to do, you would pick up the Dread Knight, and if there was a card to do, you pick up the Strike Squad, right? That kind of thing. It gives you that additional flexibility. You're not required to front load your decision making, and it lets you spread that out a little bit. It's a cool ability. It doesn't One of the things that I want to be very conscious of with the detachment rules for all of this is that, as you were saying, there's a lot of strength 6 damage 2, a lot of strength 10, not a lot that gets beyond that, right? Like the raw damage output of this army is very much embedded in quality, not quantity, and the quality kind of caps out. You are very limited on things that punch up into bigger vehicles, and all of your small stuff is kind of bad at it. Strength 6 AP2 damage 2 is a really great profile at punching things exactly in your own weight class, but it doesn't punch up super hard into toughness 10 to up saves and anything like that, or into even things like toughness 7, like Death Shroud, for example, or bigger vehicles, even like a Rhino is a real existential threat to a strike squad trying to kill it. So we're often looking for a way to try to punch up a little bit. And also, you're a little bit light on the attack volume. So we're looking for more ways to either increase that consistency or to give it some more raw damage. Right, like if you got your 15 attacks from your strike squad and you charge into a 10-man Catachan squad that you weren't able to shoot because it was behind a wall, say it was on an objective, you charge in with your 10 of your 15 attacks. You hit an average of a third of them, so you hit roughly 10 times, and then you wound with approximately 5-6 of them, so you wound 8 to 9 times. That does not kill that Catachan squad that was maybe a mark for death, maybe an overwhelming force, or no prisoners, or was just a OC on the point that you needed to kill the last one and the Chimera to flip the point, right? There's a lot of profiles like that in this army where you just need like a little bit of support to get over the edge, and this detachment rule does nothing for that, right? And that's one of the things that we always want to be looking at with the detachment rule is, does it fill a gap of a thing that we're doing, or does it make us significant? Is it transformational for the way that we play our army? And the Augurium Task Force detachment rule is not transformational. It is a side grade, or not, it is an upgrade, right? But it does cost you something. You have to choose not to pick up the maximum units. So it lets your last lift gets to be a little better, which is great, but it is not transformational in the way that some detachment rules can be. And that's usually what we're looking for in a detachment rule, because it's the thing that you will always have access to every turn of the game, or most turns of the game, depending on whether it's like a one use only kind of thing. But generally, we're looking for something that gives us raw benefit all the time for a detachment rule. And if it doesn't, you need to be looking for that output increase or that transformational power in the enhancements and stratagems. And there needs to be something in there that makes that work like that. So does our Augurium Task Force have that? Is going to be our first bar. Is, are there some things in these enhancement stratagems that make us go, oh wow, that makes my units do some things they just could not before? And is that powerful enough for me to go, to like deal with some of the specific problems that the metagame asks you? Can I deal with Death Strike? Can I deal with Big Knights? Can I deal with hordes of Gene Stealer cult models? All these kinds of questions start getting asked. And, you know, does this detachment support that? Well, let's take a look at the enhancements then. So we have a once per battle plus 4 strength for a character. We have a once per battle for the battle round plus 2 toughness. We have a move d6 after you set up in the reinforcement step, but you can't charge. And we have a forced battle shock test at -1 when you set up from reserve. This is not an incredible suite of enhancements. Plus 4 strength works pretty well with the Grandmaster, who has a once per game ability for plus 3 attacks and strength, pushes it to strength 13. It's a super cool little one tap combo, but 13 is, it's a good strength bracket, but it's still damage 2. It's not the end of the world. The plus 2 toughness is super cool on a unit of Terminators, pushing them to toughness 7, apologies, and Dread Knights can push to toughness 10. You could push an infantry squad to toughness 6, right? Like, this will definitely help. It's a cool defensive technology, but it's not anything like super incredible, right? One battle round only. You're kind of forced into using it. Potentially, if your unit's in reserve, you have to use it while you're in reserve. Your opponent can then screen out knowing that they're coming in, right? Like, there's a lot of counterplay to this kind of ability. It is definitely cool, and it's a thing you'll take if you've got 20 points. The setup in the reinforcement step, move d6, is generally just worse than a 6-inch deep strike would be. Because you can't charge off of it, you are limited to using this basically purely for shooting. Or to like create additional screens potentially, right? You drop in your Terminator squad, you move d6 inches closer to push your opponent's rapid ingress further back, things like that. Like, it's definitely useful. It's a thing you'll take. You'll never be upset to have it. But very frequently, you are better off served by trying to throw that 9-inch charge. You know, dropping in, shooting one thing, charging another is going to be a preferable pattern for most units like this. There is some cool things you can do with access to, like, dropping in your opponent screens an objective, you drop in, you roll the 6, you can potentially flip an objective with an effective 3-inch deep strike. So there are definitely powerful tools in here, and it's one that's worth considering, but not one that I'm like planning around particularly. It's more of a situational if this comes up thing. And then the Doomsayer's Amulet for the forced battle shock tests is unreliable. Battle shock mechanics are always a little awkward. It's nice to be able to turn off fight on deaths, heroic interventions, interrupts, armor contempt, whatever defensive or offensive stratagems you think your opponent could be using. You could potentially just go, no, you don't get to do that. Maybe it sets up for an easier secondary for a storm hostile objective, or something like that, an area denial. But a battle shock test at -1 on the average unit in the game being leadership 6 makes this a 44% chance to work, which is good. But it will happen a decent amount of time. You can often trigger this 3, 4, 5 times a game if you're really aggressive with dropping in and making people take battle shock tests. But how often will that actually come up? Well, you can probably expect it if you use it 3 times a game. You probably expect it to work once. If you use it 5 times a game, you might expect it twice, and that's fine. It'll definitely help when it goes off, but you can't build your turn around it, and that makes it very difficult to use. Now, you can have it be the first thing you use in your the first thing you deep strike. Potentially, you turn off an Overwatch for your second thing to drop down, right? All that kind of thing, and your opponent has to play considering the fact that you could have it. Again, not a thing you'll be upset to have, but not something I'm prioritizing super highly. Okay, for stratagems, we have a 1 CP, put a unit into reserve as deep strike at the end of your command phase, an additional double up of that detachment roll. Cool. Another unit into reserve. We can drop it in somewhere else. We can stick in objective. We can score some primary with it. Cool, right? Definitely cool ability. Nice to add another unit to our detachment ability. You have an ignore modifier stratagem for shooting in fight phase for psychers. Again, totally fine. Generally, these defensive mechanisms are either very telegraphed on the datasheet, it's like stealth, or you're degraded on a Dread Knight, or they're reactive stratagems like lightning fast reactions for Eldar, where they'll use it after you decide if you're using the stratagem. Unfortunately, this misses out on most of the relevant modifiers like damage and wound rolls, and it just because it just only covers the hit roll. Generally, when we look at damage stratagems, we are looking for something that exceeds the expected output, not sets it back to what it was. With the exception of potentially damage modifier stratagems, because they are just generally very powerful against damage to with damage to weapons, particularly. Yeah, not the most interesting stratagem. We have a crit 5 stratagem. This is the kind of thing that would be transformational if the Grey Knight book had any good sources of lethal or sustained. The Brother Captain gives lethal hits to his unit in combat, and that's kind of it. You have a couple of like the silencer style guns that are typically not super viable, and that's it. Unfortunately, just not a great book for the crit 5 stratagem. Unfortunately, outside of the detachment that it's not in. You have a -1 to hit for walkers in the same way that the ignore modifier stratagem, like -1 to hit is okay. There are a lot of rerolls, a lot of sustained hits, a lot of lethal hits in the game right now, and a lot of torrent weapons. This is the kind of stratagem that it's different to Armor of Contempt. It's differently powerful. It's nice to have a -1 to hit, but -1 to hit is not always a unique condition. If your vehicle's in combat, your opponent's vehicle's in combat, your opponent's degraded, anything like that, they can often already be -1 to hit, and having another source of it, which is also locked to just walkers, is a little disappointing. I don't think this is a great stratagem. You'll never be upset to have it, but it's also not like we're not running out to go and play this because it has the stratagem. We have Fight on Death X, where X is the turn number +1. So on turn 1, this is a 2+ Fight on Death. On turn 2, it's a 3+, and so on and so forth. This is one of those things that like is a go first tool, right? So if you go first, you can shove very aggressively with some melee units into some positions, knowing that if your opponent wants to charge them, that you're going to be fighting on death a 2+ to punish it, right? That's actually a really cool tool, and it's a nice, unique, and interesting direction. It's a very different verbiage of it. We usually expect a Fight on Death to be 4+ for 1 CP or automatic for 2 CP. And this kind of is almost automatic for 1 CP, but then degrades over the course of the game. But by turn 4 and 5, we should usually expect the game to be mostly all she wrote by that point. So having a less powerful tool at that point in the game is less important. Broadly, I think this is a cool thing. You will definitely have those games where you push your 5 paladins forward on turn 1, they get charged, you roll triple ones on the 2 to Fight on Deaths out of your 5, and you don't do nearly enough damage back. But it's the kind of thing that just telling your opponent you have this will make them play differently and might let you stage more aggressively and give you a bit more agency when you go first, which is exactly the kind of thing we're looking for, given how good our army roll is going second. And the last stratagem we have is Mirage of Echoes, which lets us go back into reserve when our opponent sets a unit up within 12 of 1 of ours. Cool thing about this, the timing works such that you can rapid ingress immediately afterwards if you're holding 2 CP. Do be careful with this stratagem to not create gaps in your screening. It's not at the end of the step or anything like that, so your opponent might go drop 1 unit on you, you go back in reserve, all that space that you were just screening out that your opponent could deep strike into suddenly becomes available. So be very conscious of that you don't open up screening gaps by getting too trigger happy with the stratagem. But again, cool. I think the thing that Augurium Task Force struggles for is not having any damage output, right? It gives you movement tools, it gives you some shenanigans, and that's cool. But unfortunately, that's kind of all it has. There is nothing transformational in here. This detachment is a bit better at scoring primary, and it gives you a bit more mobility and a Fight on Death, and that's cool. That does not excite. I think unfortunately this detachment is a bit of a dud. It just doesn't really perform super well, and we'll talk a bit about the overall win rates and stuff like that when we get to the end. But yeah, I think Augurium's Task Force is one that you don't really have to worry about too much. Next up, we have Banishers, which is certainly the one that I was the most intrigued by when I read the Codex of the Codex detachments. When you Select your unit to fight. In combat, you can take a leadership test. If you pass it, which most things in this book are leadership 6, so you'll be passing more than 2/3 of the time, you get either sustained hits 1 or lethal hits. Now, sustained and lethal are really, really powerful on strength 6 weapons. Strength 6 is exactly that breakpoint where you're really good at killing things that are the same size as you, but quite bad at punching up into those 2-up saves and toughness 10s and 12 and toughness 12s, where lethal hits is phenomenal. And you don't have the attack volume to punch down into the Catachan squads that I was talking about earlier. The sustained hits 1 helps a ton there, right? So this is a genuine transformational power. Unfortunately, it's not automatic. It's not guaranteed. You can't rely on it, especially against any leadership modifiers like armies like Chaos Knights that are very big in the metagame. Even things like Death Shroud have a -1 leadership aura. There's a lot of things out there that just say, "Oh, you were planning on having that." No, you don't, and that is really kind of sad for me. I think that's it's a powerful ability, but one that is unreliable, and that makes it very difficult to plan your turn, very difficult to do anything, because at the end of the fight, when you're taking these tests in the fight phase, it's too late to adjust your plan. You are committed to the course of action you're on, and suddenly it didn't work. Oh no, what are you going to do, right? Like there's very little chance to do course correction at that stage in the game. Okay, enhancements. We have reroll 1s to hit and shooting from Sigil of the Hunt. We have a move d6 at the start of your shooting phase, but cannot charge, very similar to the one in the previous detachment. We have at the start of your shooting phase, deal d3 mortal wounds to unit than 24, and we have +1 AP in shooting. I think it's very strange how many of these enhancements center around shooting. Like your army roll is or your detachment roll is melee based, and all your enhancements are shooting based. Like, why, right? Why are we doing it this way? It feels like the Banisher rule could have worked in shooting, or these enhancements could have been shooting and melee, and it would have been totally fine. But such is life. Reader 1s to hit and +1 AP in the shooting phase, both pretty solid on Dread Knights or Paladins, or I guess a Purifier squad with a Tech Marine if you really want to go that route. Never bad. The move d6 at the start shooting phase is a better timing than the Augurium Task Force one, being able to block out rapid ingresses and then see where it goes and then move responsibly to it to potentially either see it or move away from it. Being able to like make a decision with a bit more information, right? Because it's just a better timing. But yeah, not letting you charge kind of anti-synergizes with the detachment rule, which again I just don't love. And then Pyre Soul, 3 mortal wounds on a D3. If you've got 20 points, you take this. It's a good enhancement. 20 points for a flat mini grenade. Every time you drop in, you can probably trigger this 5 times a game. It should not be hard if you're playing safe with a character like a solo librarian or a Dread Knight Grandmaster that's playing defensively, right? Anything like that. Just a good enhancement that you'll be happy to take. Grey Knights is an army with lots of awkward points intervals. Nothing is very cheap, so you'll often find that you have just like 20 to 30 points floating, and this is the kind of enhancement that fills that gap super well without ever requiring you to really think about it. It just does its job every game. Okay, for stratagems, we have Shadow of an Arc, which is Missive Deimos. So your opponent ends a move with 9 of you. You can either go back in strategic reserve or move 6 inches. Great, incredibly powerful tool. Makes your opponent think about moving near every single unit that you have. You have the ability to go back into reserve and then rapid ingress straight back down. It makes pressuring you much tougher. Obviously, this has the sort of caveat that Mr. Deimos always had, that if your opponent just shoves at you and makes you pick which one you're picking up, you can only pick one, right? You can't have both. So you do have to be very careful about not presenting your opponent too many threats at once. But you can do some really powerful things with this, like charging something and with a unit to kill it, and then tapping something else that has a movement value of less than 9. And then if it falls back from you at all, you can go back in reserve. And if it doesn't fall back from you, well, then it can't shoot you. So against stuff like Tau or Guard, anything that has like very limited melee presence, this can give you a lot of ability to just keep recycling your units back and forth as long as you can hit those charges. Which with the power of rapid ingress from Game Infinity now is a little easier to consistently do throughout the game. Again, very CP intensive, but a really cool thing. We've got the Hexrot Reprisal, which lets you bounce mortal wounds back on a 2+. This basically, you pick a unit that dealt mortal wounds to you, and then for each mortal wound you suffered this phase, you deal mortal wound back to on a 2+ to a cap of 6. Tracking Nightmare, generally pretty good. You do have to live to use it, which is a little bit limiting, but a powerful ability that will dissuade people from grenading you. Truly, again, one of those things where the existence does more to stop your opponent grenading you than the actual fact that you could take the mortal wounds is. Notably, it does work against things like devastating wounds. So if you've got like a big squad of 10 paladins, you take a few dev wounds, you can bounce a lot back to a unit that did some damage to you. You have a Feel No Pain against damage 1 attacks in the shooting or fight phase. Totally fine. Again, not armor contempt. Better in some situations, much worse in others. Rarely anything you'll be unhappy to have. We have Anti-Chaos 4+ on ranged weapons, which is just a hilarious, full-on, incredible hater energy. This is a stratagem designed by Lex Luthor, for all I know. Makes some of your units very, very threatening to big things. Stuff like Purifiers with their wound rerolls, or Dread Knights with their heavy volume shots, you can put a lot of damage on something big like Angron or a Chaos Knight with this ability. We have Infantry, the ability to advance and charge. Yeah, no complaints. Great for your Terminators, great for your Paladins, great for your Infantry. Amazing on Crow and Purifiers. Does not give advance and shoot, notably. And there's not a lot of stuff with assault weapons in this book, so you will not be advancing, shooting, and charging. But small price to pay for being able to just have that additional move. I'm just going to double check the timing on this one because I can never. There are so many different ways to have the timing on advance and charge. Because this is a charge phase stratagem, I believe that you would be able to throw a bunch of advances and then make a decision. Yeah, it's a charge phase stratagem. So you can make a decision about when to use this based on how the rest of the turn went, right? You can throw 3 units forward behind walls and then make a decision about, well, this one has a charge at that unit if it doesn't die, and then this one can charge that unit if that one doesn't die. And then if they both die, I have a Hail Mary charge here that I can potentially advance a charge to, right? You've got some interesting dynamics there. Do watch out for any abilities to battle shock you during the movement phase or during the shooting phase. If you get caught out by that, you will not be able to use the stratagem at that time. But again, battle shock mechanics, what are we doing? And then lastly, we have a character can declare at the start of your opponent's reinforcement step that they have a 12-inch no deep strike aura, which is super cool. It's great on a Dread Knight, helps with things like the Gene Cycle matchup, right? Definitely super powerful. Unfortunately, it's just the character model. It doesn't affect the unit, and it's obviously just a single character unit. Unlike something like the Alpha Legion Deceptor stratagem, which covers an entire unit, you could have that on like 20 cultists. That's a lot more space to fill up. Notably, I think Banisher is a cool detachment. I think it has all of the right words, it's right, all the right stuff, just assembled in a weird way. Where the enhancements want you to shoot, the detachment rule wants you to fight, the army rule kind of wants you to shoot, and then the stratagems are combat based and shooting based. Like there's a very eclectic mix of nothing. There's no like clear direction given by Banishers. It gives you a genuinely transformational damage output that you can't rely on, and it gives you the ability to make your shooting a little bit more efficient, and then some very, very powerful strategies, specifically advance and charge, and with celerity and Shadow of an Arc for the go back into reserve / move reactive move 6. Both incredibly powerful abilities that I would not be upset with. I think Banishers is one of the better book detachments. I think it lands out to being pretty strong. Unfortunately, the data will not back that up when we talk about it later. But I think overall, I think Banisher is a cool detachment and one that warrants experimentation. Like I said, it has genuine transformational power here, and Shadow of an Arc is an incredibly powerful ability on Dread Knights or Paladins or Crow Purifiers, whatever you want to support. Banishers does give you a way to do that, and I think that's super cool. It's probably the best damage output of any of the book detachments in a raw sense for playing like an on-the-board game plan. Now, if you're not as interested in playing an on-the-board game plan and you want to be teleporting about the place all the time, units that set up from Deep Strike in Brotherhood Strike get reroll 1s to hit and wound until the end of the turn. Shooting and fighting. So if you just want to do more damage in shooting, more damage in combat, Brotherhood Strike gives you it's a 17% increase twice. So you're good at getting like a 20, 25, 30% increase in your damage output pretty consistently. There is nothing wrong with that. Yeah, 1.17 times 1.17. Yeah, you're just getting a 36% damage output increase on any unit that came in from reserve, assuming you didn't already have natural rerolls like something like Purifiers would. Genuinely great rule. Just pure, you do 35% more damage. What's not to like? Now, you do have to be coming in from reserve, which means you're either putting more stuff in reserve or you're relying on the units coming from Gate of Infinity. Maybe you're picking up more stuff early and saving them in reserve so you can have like a big drop turn, right? But yeah, do you know what? That's a cool ability. It's a cool detachment rule. Again, does that same thing, right? So sustained hits is usually somewhere in the region of a 25% damage output increase. Lethal hits can be as much as a 300% damage output increase, depending on what you're fighting. But by and large, this is going to be somewhere between. It's better than the sustained hits version, and it works on shooting, and it's worse than lethal hits when lethal hits is good, but it works on shooting, right? So again, it just supports more of that stuff that Game Infinity wants you to do, right? I think Brotherhood Strike, for that reason, is rawly a more powerful detachment than Banishers because it always works, assuming you can meet the conditions, but you know whether you're meeting the conditions or not, right? That surety of knowing that when you drop down, you will have this rule, for me, makes this a stronger detachment ability, unfortunately. Now, for enhancements, we have Banishing Wave, which is a 12-inch aura of mortal wounds on a 2+ when you set up. And then if you roll a 6, it's a D3. Again, fine. If you have 20 points, take it. It's free mortal wounds. Potentially, if there's like single models standing about, you can chip a wound off that last ranger that lived. It dies. Suddenly, there's a gap in your opponent's screening. So maybe your opponent, you can tell your opponent about that, and they maybe have to use an extra unit to screen, and then you can kill that extra unit and do some extra damage, right? Totally fine. Blinding Aura stops you from being overwatched. Cool. It's there. You'll take it if you have 10 points. Purity of Purpose, reroll charges when you set from Deep Strike. Again, totally fine enhancement. Chuck it on a Dread Knight, chuck it on a Tech Marine, whatever you're doing, just it's okay. And then Tome of Forbidden Ways lets you pick up an extra unit. This is probably the best sauce in the detachment, just that 25 points, letting you have 4 units picking up every turn, 4 units using your detachment roll. You need to have 4 active units that aren't engaged in combat to use it on, but if you have them, great. I don't think you need to take this by any stretch because Grey Knights are not an army that has 30, 40, 50 point units like Hypercrypt does in order to have even more stuff coming up where this would be worth it. But it does exist. It is there if you want it. If you find that that's a play pattern that you're struggling with, it'll fill a 25 point gap in your army pretty well. Now, 2CP, we have remove a unit from the Deep Strike in the battlefield at the end of your opponent's fight phase. This works in combat. That is the notable exception to this one. It lets you pick up a unit that your opponent has jammed up. It's a cool ability. 2CP is a lot, but it does mean that you can just keep your unit going. It's effectively fall back and shoot in a detachment that doesn't have fall back and shoot. Yeah, totally fine. 2CP for infantry psychic weapons, gain devastating wounds. Dev wounds is a great ability. The attack volume on Grey Knight units tends to be pretty low, but if you're running like a big 10 brick of paladins, there's a lot of attacks to give devastating wounds to. Definitely something to keep in your pocket, something to remember, and it does help with that punching up, but always a sketchy ability, especially for 2CP. 1CP for 6-inch deep strike but cannot charge. It's there, it's live, flipping objectives, getting your strike squads. Interceptors are really good with this because they can fire and fade 6 inches after they drop in. You can use this to get on objectives, to flip around, to get into gaps. You're never going to be upset to have it. Purgation pattern, your unit set from deep strike gains sustained hits 1. Again, totally fine. You have reroll ones to hit, so it's going to help your damage output if you're playing a big squad of Purifiers with Crow. You can have that 68 shots that unit has suddenly has sustained hits. That's adding a very meaningful amount of damage output. That kind of space where, yeah, again, it's a good damage output strategy. You'll never be upset to have it. 1CP to return a unit with Deep Strike to Strategic Reserves. I'm going to double check the timing on that one because I did not write that down. Duty unending. Your opponent's movement phase after a unit falls back from you. Yeah, okay, cool. I'll just skip all the important. Yeah, so this is another version of Shadow of an Arc, the one that we mentioned in there, where it's specifically when your opponent falls back from you, so it doesn't work when your opponent like runs at you. But being able to just teleport away when your opponent falls back is a totally powerful ability. And yeah, apologies for missing that off of there. I'm actually just going to type that in while we chat here. So yeah, I think the general rule of thumb here is that stratagem is going to be when an enemy unit falls back from it. There we go. Cool. So yeah, you can go back into strategic reserve, and like you gives you that ability to apply pressure and then keep reusing your units. It also lets you retrigger your detachment roll. Yeah, totally great. And then Shining Veil, giving your unit stealth, another version of -1 to hit, better than the Trusa, the Augurium Task Force one that only worked on walkers. This works on everything. It is stealth, so there are some things that just naturally ignore that, like but generally not a huge deal. A nice stratagem to have working on Terminators and Infantry. Generally better. You'd prefer to have Armor of Contempt, but this one does last to the end of the shooting phase, unlike Armor of Contempt, which is only for an activation. So in some situations, it will be better. In general, it's a little worse because, again, lethal hits, sustained hits, torrent all bypass it. Overall, I think Brotherhood Strike is a really cool, really powerful detachment. Having duty and ending to keep you recycling your units, being able to pick up 4 units a turn, having 6-inch deep strike, right? All these things just help you just keep you going. It's also, unlike Banishers, it's not locked into just playing for combat. You can also shoot, right? Which supports Dread Knights, which supports Purifiers, all these kind of data sheets that are very, very powerful and have like a little bit of a damage problem. Get that problem solved a little bit. It is a bit more natural on, you have to hit your charges. It does have the awkward it does have kind of poor timing where it doesn't work from rapid ingress. So something like Oath of Ascension, which has for Gene Stealer Cults, which has the ability to last for sustained to signal recover until the end of the next fight phase. Their next fight phase means that if you rapid ingress, you would still have this ability. Brotherhood Strike does not have that. It is purely on the turn you come in. So you are less incentivized towards playing through rapid ingress with this detachment, which I do think is a real cost. It does make it a little bit worse at applying pressure to its opponent's primary, a little bit worse at getting to combat. But if you can hit your 9-inch charges, this detachment's going to feel really powerful. And I do think I generally like it better than Banishers. Okay, next up we have Hallowed Conclave, which is generally this is the Terminator detachment. It wants to support you doing cool, getting stuck in things with your Terminators, almost all of the stratagems are Terminator or Infantry only, and they really, really want you to play Terminators. So what does this give them? It gives them fallback, shoot, and charge, which is transformational, right? The detachment rule does not work while the army rule does not work while you're engaged in Age of Infinity. You can't pick up units that are in combat. So what do? Well, you just keep them going. They fall back, they shoot again, they charge again, they keep going, right? This army doesn't want you to get stuck in. It wants you to use those Nartheciums, just keep bringing squads back. The builds I've seen for this one tend to lean more towards like 4-man MSU squads of Terminators and Paladins, just getting like really, really grindy game plans. So how does this support that? Because again, there's no damage coming from that detachment rule. So where are we getting our damage? Well, once per game, you can give your Terminator character +3 attacks to his melee weapons. Okay, that works pretty well on some characters. We've got once per battle round, free heroic or Overwatch for 0 CP, even if another unit has already used the stratagem. Good at getting into combat. Free Overwatch is not bad. This one notably can go on something like a Dread Knight. Not a bad place to have it. We've got a crappy mortal wound ability when our opponent falls back from us. Sure, it's there. 2+ D3 mortal wounds and a 6, it's D3 +3. If you've got 20 points, I suppose. And then you've got Nemesis Range, which gives the Terminator squad Overwatch on 5s. Not bad again if you've got that 10-point spare, putting it on a Paladin squad or a Librarian or something with a Librarian, something like that to get some shooting output. Yeah, you'll not be unhappy to have it. Giants of the Battlefield for stratagems. We've got 1 CP +1 attack in combat. We've got fight on death on a 4+ or shoot on death on a 4+. A bit unique there. Having 4-up shoot on death is actually genuinely kind of cool. It potentially lets you open up some charge opportunities or prevents your opponent from flipping an objective that they thought they were going to because they just died. And then fight on death on a 4-up is totally fine. We've got Stormbolters getting pistol and twin linked. Yep, totally great. You'll be happy to have it. You can dig yourself out of a combat with something like probably Purifiers or Strike Marines that got stuck in that couldn't get out. Your Terminator should probably be fallback shooting charging. Potentially your opponent's like wrapped you, so you don't want to fall back, and this can help you dig yourself out. We've got Charge Mortals for Terminators. Aces. The fact you have to pay CP for it's a little rough, but Tank Shock's never bad. We've got a reactive move D6 when our opponent ends with a 9, the worst version of Mr. Deimos, or Shadow of an Arc, I guess. You're never going to be unhappy to have it. You can disappear back behind a wall. You can come out more aggressively to threaten a heroic, whatever you want. It being a D6 reactive move does make it a little unreliable. You don't want to have to, you want to be trying to set up situations where if you roll a 2+, you can hide, get your 40mm bases back over that wall. Generally, a 1 will not work because just none of your infantry is on spawn on a 32 base. But if you can hit a 2+, you can disappear. That's totally fine. And then -1 to wound if the strength of the attack is greater than toughness for the shooting phase only. Mini Transhuman for your Grey Knight Terminators. Totally powerful ability. It does some good work. It's a good stratagem to have. It'll help you keep your Terminators alive to use those Apothecaries to bring some models back, keep an objective with your 3 OC Terminators, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no complaints. Totally fine. Overall, I think Hallowed Conclave is a little lackluster. I think there's just, again, there's a +1 attack stratagem, which is 25% damage output increase, but that's kind of it. Everything else is shenanigansy or like a little bit of defensive technology for some of the. I think Terminators ended up being one of the weaker data sheets in the Codex, unfortunately, just not the raw power that you can get from other places. But I think that Hallowed Conclave is interesting enough. There's enough juice here to like have a game plan with, right? MSU Terminator spam, maximizing the strength of those Nartheciums to bring as many models back you can, and just playing a super, super grindy game. I think it's totally fine. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's present. Lastly, for the Codex detachments, we have Sanctic Spearhead, which is vehicles gain auto advance 6 and assault. This makes your vehicles very fast, particularly Nemesis Dread Knights, which have natural advance shoot and charge, which means that you can have a Dread Knight that just goes 14 and charges and shoots, and they are very dynamic, very good at getting across the table and causing a ton of problems. It's also pretty good on the Grandmaster Dread Knight for just keeping you playing the game, and then the Storm Raven and the Land Raider Redeemer are always considerations for rules like this. Flat advancing 6 with a Land Raider Redeemer going 18 inches and shooting those flamers is nightmare fuel for a lot of people. And certainly when I playtested this detachment for a small RTT, it was one of the things that my opponents were the most worried about. Okay, for enhancements, we have Driven by Duty, gives your Walker 6-inch poly consolidation. It's there, it's okay. Sigil of Exigence is the redeploy outside 9 of your opponent when your opponent targets you for shooting, and then your opponent gets to retarget. Great on a Nemesis Dread Knight, great on a Terminator squad. Lets you play very aggressively with the unit and then say, if you either charge this or you let me be here. And it creates incredible mind games for your opponent where they have to make the decision to just not try to kill something. They have to charge it. Potentially, it's not something they want to charge. There's unfortunately no fight first access in this book. You don't have things like the Brotherhood Champion giving fight first anymore, which would have been a really cool place to have that. But yeah, really good on Nemesis Dread Knight, probably at its best there. We have Infantry can reroll charge on the turn where it disembarked. It's okay, not exciting. And then Spiritus Maxima, reroll wounds in the shooting phase of turn when you disembark. Doesn't do anything for Purifiers because they already rerolled the wound. Not bad on strike squads. It does only work in shooting. If you've got a Land Raider full of Terminators, it's not going to be bad. But why are you playing a Land Raider full of Terminators? This is the tournament's video. Let's not do that. Okay, stratagems. We have Truce of a Will. 4-up Philippine against mortal wounds at the end of the phase. Totally fine. You'll use this. It's a decent little free strat with the Nemesis Dread Knight when it cops a grenade or something like that. Yeah, you'll never be unhappy to have it. Shooting fight phase +1 to wound versus monsters and vehicles. The fact that this works on anything is great. You can use this on your Land Raider. You can use this on your Purifier squad. And it works in both phases. Great stratagem. Genuinely, one of the reasons to play this attachment is that it just says whatever you want, whenever you want it. If it's an important thing for you to kill, except like exactly Death Shroud, here's +1 to wounding. It's Death Shroud and Wraiths are like the only things that you would like really need some help against that you don't get help against from this stratagem. Armored Aegis to heal 3 wounds in the command phase. Again, totally fine. If you've got nothing else to do with your Dread Knight's free strat, it's a good place to go. If your Land Raider's just trucking along being unkillable, yep, totally fine. Can push you over a Battle Shock threshold as well. If you were potentially at like 6 of 13, you were going to need to take a Battle Shock. You were considering auto passing it. Well, you might as well just heal 3 wounds instead, and then you don't need to auto pass because you don't need a Battle Shock test anymore. Force Wave lets you go through terrain on normal moves, advancing charges. This is great. Land Raider Redeemer going 18 through a wall. Storm Raven going 26 through a wall. Dread Knights charging through walls. Yeah, great stratagem. Transformational for the way those data sheets play. It lets their movement so much better, especially if you're in like UKTC or WC terrain. On GW terrain, this is less priority, but it's definitely still not bad there. And then Argent Wrath, an aura Battle Shock test at -1 after you charge move. It's okay. You can potentially stop heroics. You can potentially stop fight first, interrupt, or fight on death, interrupts, all that kind of thing. Unreliable, but the fact that it's an aura and you can have it coming off of some large vehicle models is not bad. I think Sanctic Spearhead is totally fine. I think it's not the most exciting detachment. It definitely does say play a bunch of vehicles. You know, you're going to play 3, 4, 5 Nemesis Dread Knights and probably another vehicle on top of that. Maybe a Storm Raven, maybe a Land Raider Redeemer, maybe some Razorbacks. It really wants you to play vehicles. It really wants you to lean into them. Being able to go through walls, having plus damage stratagems, it's great, right? It really does support all of them pretty well. I do think it lacks a little bit on the supporting infantry side, and if there is a lot of power in the infantry in this book, and this detachment does nothing for them, so do be aware of that if you lean into it. But yeah, it's totally cool. I think Sanctic Spearhead works really well, and we do actually have an example Sanctic Spearhead list in the list section at the end of this video. Okay, lastly, we have Warpbane Task Force, which is the Grotmus detachment, which is probably, and unfortunately, the strongest way to play Grey Knights. This detachment is just really good. So for anybody who is not familiar with the Grotmus detachment, you can find it on the Games Workshop website. You don't need to pay by the book or anything. It's just on the website. You basically get a real army-wide real ones to hit all the time, which is great. Before we even touch anything, it's half of Brotherhood Strike, and you don't even have to work for it. Then, if your unit's wholly within your deployment zone, wholly within 6 of Purifiers, or wholly within a zone that you control more than half of the objectives of, so if you control 2 of the 3 No Man's Land objectives, or your opponent's deployment zone objective, you'll have it in that zone as well. You just get full hit rerolls, and some of your stratagems get better. It's called Hallowed Ground. So if I reference that again, that's what that ability is. Full rerolls to hit is psychotically good. It is just on everything an insane amount of damage input. You increase your damage output by 33% on everything that hits on 3s. You're more reliable. You are more vulnerable to, less vulnerable to -1 to hit modifiers. You are better at overwatching. Right? I don't need to explain to you how good -1 to hit is. This is pseudo, or reroll to hit is. This is pseudo Oath of Moment on your entire army all the time. And it's great. You have to work a little bit for it in No Man's Land, but Purifiers got one of the biggest glow-ups of the edition on their data sheet. And the fact that this detachment wants you to run Purifiers because they just give out that aura is incredible. The enhancements are okay. We have +3 OC while not battle shocked. It's there. If you have 20 points, you'll take it. You have Paragon of Sanctity, which gives you once per battle, pick a unit with an 18 to be in Hallowed Ground. It's fine. It's there again if you have 10 points. Radiant Champion gives an infantry character precision in melee and +1 mortal wound on successful wound roll. Really solid on a Tech Marine in a Purifier squad, giving that guy's got 5 attacks. He gets full rules to wound from the Purifiers. It's not bad on the Brotherhood Champion with his stacking attacks. He does already naturally have precision, but again, not a bad place to be. Solid little enhancement, really powerful. You do have to be in Hallowed Ground to get the mortal wounds, but there are mortal wounds in addition, which means that you could potentially kill like 4 or 5 models with the mortal wounds plus whatever they take in the regular saves, right? Just a really cool ability. And then File of the Abyss gives you stealth. It's there, 25 points. Put it on a Terminator squad, put it on a Purifier squad. It's okay. And the stratagems are strong. but not excessively so, I think. Definitely this is a detachment that's centered around its detachment rule. And I think that's one of the things that makes it the strongest detachment, is it just has the best detachment rule in a book that is pretty CP starved already. There's no natural CP generation. There's a bit of free stratagem usage, but it's pretty limited on what detachments, what state sheets it's on. And this army could use stratagems like water. Like you have grenade keyword, you're an infantry army, so go to ground is always live. You want to be rapid ingressing. So having a strong detachment rule and weaker stratagems is generally to the preference for this army. So you have Sanctified Kill Zone, reroll ones to wound or all wounds if you're a purified unit while you're in hallowed ground. Great, just 17% damage output increase. You do a little bit more damage. Purifiers reroll to wound if your target's on an objective already, but being able to just go, oh, you're not on an objective, cool, die anyway, is never bad. You will just make your opponent take a lot of saves, especially with Crow's unit with their 68 attacks and shooting. You will make your opponent take a lot of saves by just having full wound rerolls on top of full hit rerolls. You can do mortal wounds to everything within 6 of the purifiers at the end of the fight phase. It's there. You'll maybe finish off a flipping of an objective or kill a unit that was screening, something like that. Yeah, it's there. It's okay. You get +1 to that roll if it's Crow, so it's a more reliable. Yeah, it's fine. You've got 6-inch deep strike for infantry that are not Terminators. Transformational on Crow, amazing on strike squads, good on interceptors. Anything you want. 6-inch deep strike is never bad. You do have to be in hallowed ground to use it. But you can do things like Purifier drop pod. You drop a Purifier squad at 9 inches of something, and then that opens up the hallowed ground aura within 6 of the Purifiers, and then your unit that wants to use the stratagem can then come in off of the Purifier's hallowed ground at 6 inches of your opponent. So you can set up some really reliable 6-inch charges. It's like Drago never left. Fires of the Covenant gives you an aura of mortal wounds to any units that end within 6 of your infantry unit. Sure, it's a 2+ if you're in hallowed ground. Sure, it's there. You can get a 4 vulnerable save against shooting while you're in hallowed ground. Again, it's not armoric attempt, but if you're getting caught in the open by a Rogodorn with your Purifier squad, it's probably better than popping go to ground, because at least it'll work against the multi-meltas. So again, not a bad tool to have, but situational. And then you could do -1 to charge for your infantry, -2 if you're in hallowed ground. Not transformational, but making your opponent's deep strike charges at an 11 instead of a 9 is never bad. There's a lot of medium speed infantry in the metagame right now, whether it's Delve, Votan, Black Templars, Sword Brethren, World Eaters, Berserkers. Just making them have that chance of failing. You're often trading your CP for one of theirs as they have to CP roll it, but pushing your opponent back from reserves or just making them not hit a charge, not able to tag into something else, not able to flip a primary, can win you the game on the spot. I think Warpbane is incredible, and it's the metric by which all other detachments should be judged for this codex. It's very powerful. It suits an incredible amount of gameplay, and I think in general, if you're playing Grey Knights, you should default to Warpbane and then look for very strong reasons not to play it. It supports shooting, it supports combat, it has good stratagems, but not excessive stratagems, so you can focus on using rapid ingresses and all that kind of thing to be priority, because the stratagems are a bit more situational. You're not locked into feeling like you have to use them to get detachment value. The enhancements are there, but you can mostly focus on your attachments, and it supports one of the best state sheets of the game, in the book, even for purifiers, which I think is just great. Right? It works very, very well. Okay, we spent a bunch of time talking about detachments. Let's talk a bit about the data sheets. I want to rattle through these without going super in depth on them. By and large, the Terminator characters are toughness 5, 2 up save, 4 vulnerable save, with between 5 and 7 wounds. Most of these characters will have a damage 2 melee weapon and a gun of some kind. I will mention it if it's specific. So the brother captain leads Terminators. He gives himself reroll to wound, and he gives his unit lethal hits. He gets to hold a special weapon, so you can hold like a side cannon or an incinerator, and he has the damage to melee profiles. The brother captain is okay. Lethal hits is good. It synergizes well with the crit 5s enhancement in that one detachment. Hallowed Conclave, I think that was one. No, that can't be right. Augurium Task Force. And him himself having wound rerolls does help with his damage output. It's a bit of an anti-synergy with lethal hits, but it's never bad. Yeah, the brother captain is okay. He does not confer. The Grandmaster is the other character that leads Terminators that is in the sort of weight class of being a punchy character with free stratagem plus 3 attacks strike the melee once per game. And his free strat is the same free stratagem that the Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight has. So you might not want to play too many characters with the same ability because you're not getting a ton of value out of it. The brother captain's a bit cheaper, still confers that special weapon, gives you a bit more damage to the unit itself rather than damage to himself, and it's not once per game. So if you're playing a bit more of that repetitive style with like Hallowed Conclave, fallback, shooting, charging, the brother captain can keep you going with that a little bit better. Totally fine. The Brotherhood Chaplain lets you reroll battle shocks and gives charge rerolls to his unit. This guy is kind of terrible. He is nice and cheap. He has damage to melee, but I could see taking him if you just had like 65 points and you wanted a solo unit and you were trying to play purely Grey Knights. He's about the same points as an Imperial Agent unit for just being a stand and go unit, and he's totally not very good. The fact he doesn't give +1 to hit, a +1 to wound like the Space Marine Chaplain does is embarrassing. If this guy was +1 to wound and Leadership 5, I think he'd actually be really cool in Banishers, because sustained hits with +1 to wound and Leadership 5 to more reliably pass that test would have been great, but he just isn't. He just doesn't do that. The Brotherhood Librarian gives you a 4 Feeling Pain versus Psychic attacks and Lone Operative 18, and then has a genuinely pretty good shooting attack. He's D6 plus 3 shots, blast at 822. I think this guy's very, very solid. He goes well in Warpbane. He goes well with any army that's trying to play Terminators. He's a really solid solo character. 80 points to just drop in and shoot. In Warpbane specifically, being full rerolls is really good. He can actually just rinse damage on units that get caught in the open. I think if you're looking for a solo character, the Librarian is definitely the place to go. He's a bit less spiky than he used to be, worse into bigger targets, but really good at killing those sort of medium infantry and vehicle targets, and also doing some secondaries on the way through if you need to. Yeah, I do strongly recommend you look at the Brotherhood Librarian. It's a really solid character, and we've already touched on the Grandmaster. So those are the Terminator leaders. They join Paladins and Terminators, which we'll talk about in a bit. The Brotherhood Champion joins Strikes and Purgation Squads and gives advance to charge, and he gains CP and +1 attack when he kills a character in melee. He's got a precision damage 2 attack and 5 attacks. He's fine. If you're playing Strike Marines and you really want to give them advance and charge, he's there. He's 70 points. You'll never be too upset. Not having Fight First anymore is a bit sad, but certainly not a bad character for 70 points. The Brotherhood Tech Marine joins the same things, but also joins Purifiers. The fact that the Brotherhood Champion doesn't join Purifiers is an embarrassment. He has an extra damage 3 attack. He gets Lone Operative when he's near vehicles. He has the standard heal D3 and give +1 to hit to vehicles, so he supports Dread Knights and Land Raiders and Storm Ravens pretty well. And he also can free heroic intervention near vehicles, even if another thing is already heroic. Totally fine character. If you're playing a bunch of vehicles and you want to support it, it's not a bad place to be. If you want to put an enhancement into Purifier squads, the Tech Marine is the only way to do it. I think the best way to use this guy is with Radiant Champion in a Warpbane army. You give him the full wound rerolls from joining a Purifier squad, and he can slap a heal on an Nemesis Dread Knight on the way through, and then go in and do full hit rerolls, full wound rerolls, plus mortal wound on every successful wound with his 5 attacks, because he's got his 4 regular attacks and his 1 extra attack from his servo harness. So yeah, not bad. The Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, 225 points for a walker, gets rerolls to hit in melee, rerolls to hit, wound, and damage in melee against vehicles and monsters, which is most of the things you're looking at targeting, and has access to a bunch of really, really good melee options. So he's got, generally you're going to run the Grandmaster with the Nemesis Dreadhammer, which is 14, 3, d6 plus 1 damage. You'll run them in shooting with the Heavy Psy Cannon, which is 6 shots at 10, 2, 3, ignore cover. 24 range, and then either the Heavy Incinerator, which is a 2d6 shot 611 flamer with ignore cover and torrent, or the Sublimator, which is a Melta 4 2-shot gun with strength 9 AP4 d6 damage d6 and twin linked. You'll generally run 2 of those, the Psy Cannon, 1 of those other 2. They rapid ingress well. They have a free stratagem. They get wound rolls, full rerolls in combat. So against anything that's like a real threat, they are probably the only true answer to something to the size of like a land fortress or a big knight, right? They're the only thing in the army that's going to really win them on 3s with rerolls. They're very consistent. They're very good. They're toughness 8, 2-up save, 4 from vulnerable save, 13 wounds. So a very strange durability profile, but they mostly trade on their high wound count and their good save more so than their toughness, right? A lot of things like multi-melted and win them on 3s. So you do have to be a little careful with these guys. They are not like walls, but they are very durable against the right kind of things. And if you play a game in such a way that you protect these guys until late game, they will take over. They are very good at that. The Venerable Dreadnought is a walker vehicle that has the sort of usual array of, do you want a multi-melta, a las cannon, a twin assault cannon, etc. They're damage 3 in melee, and if once they shoot something, everything else that shoots it gets +1 to hit. They're totally fine. 140 points for a toughness, a high toughness 2-up save model that deep strikes is a character. They can hold some enhancements. They're okay. I'm not a huge fan of the Venerable Dreadnought, but it's there. Castellan Crow is probably the best data sheet in this book. He is a Purifier leader that gives them +1 shot on their Purifier weapons, and he has natural rerolls to hit. The Purifier's gun is 1 shot at 421, anti-infantry 2+, ignore cover. And then you double the shots on that. You push that unit of 10 to 20 shots with that profile. They will shred infantry to bits. The game has a lot of infantry in it. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but Eldar, Death Guard, Custodes, Space Marines, Gene Circle, all these armies, everybody plays infantry in some capacity. And even if they don't, the volume of AP2 with reroll wound rolls against units on objectives from Purifiers is insane, and Crow makes it even better. He's also pretty good in combat. He's devastating wounds. He's got natural rerolls to hit for himself. So if you're playing a detachment that's not Warpbane, he can still do some extra damage. Crow is amazing. You should play Crow. Like, your army includes Crow. You should start with Crow and 10 Purifiers. And then we have Valdus. He's a damage 3 melee guy with a Thunder Hammer. He deals mortal wounds at the start of the fight phase and gives his unit -1 to hit. He also has a weird shooting attack. It's D3 plus 1 shots at something like 12 2 devastating wounds. It's interesting. It's okay. He's probably just not better than Librarian for the same kind of ideas. Lone Up 18 is generally better than -1 to hit, but, Valdus is cool. I don't think he's terrible. Okay, for infantry, there's not a ton here. Paladins and Purifiers are 40 and 45 point Terminator models. They are broadly the same in terms of general profile. They are 4 attacks at 622. The Paladins hit on 2s instead of 3s like the Terminators. They come in 4, 5, 8, and 10 models, and they both have the same wargear options. 1 per 5 in the Brotherhood Terminator squad can take a special weapon, either like a heavy flamer, a psi cannon, or a silencer, and then I believe it's 2 per 5 for the Paladins can take that. And then you get like an extra 1 in the Paladin squad, I believe, on the Banner guy, something to that effect. They both have the Banner, which gives them +1 OC, so the OC 3 on the Terminators and OC 2 on the Paladins, and they have the Nethesium that brings a model back in each command phase. Generally, these guys are fine. They are solid little vehicles. They are good for 2-up armor save, 4-up vulnerable save, 3-wound models. They have sneaky durability with Resurrection. They can keep playing the game pretty well. They will just keep going and keep going and keep going. You are unlikely to chew through them in one activation unless you are playing like way too aggressive with them. And as long as you're keeping like 1 or 2 models behind a wall, they are usually going to be, you're going to be able to keep them alive and ticking. And if you can keep bringing models back, eventually you can grind your opponent out with them. As far as their datasheet rules, Brotherhood Terminators get +1 AP and melee against non-vehicle and monster, so they're, generally they're aiming towards killing your infantry kind of profiles. And then Paladins get +1 damage on charge for the Paladin models only, which does push them to damage 3, so they're 6-2-3. So if you can they're a pretty good vehicle for any kind of damage buffs. Unfortunately, this does not buff the characters, and I think this is one of my biggest critiques of the Grey Knight book, is that every time you look for a cool synergy, like that Grandmaster that gets his once per game +3 attacks and strength, would be really cool in a Paladin squad if it synergized with him at all, right? And it's a bit of a shame that it feels like a whole bunch of gates were put on this army to stop it from having cool effects like that. Generally, I think the Brotherhood Terminators are the better of the two. Just being a bit cheaper and having the higher OC means they fulfill their job a little better. Paladins are good, but they're expensive, and the +1 damage means that they kind of want to be a vehicle for characters, but they kind of don't. And they're both lacking in durability, right? The Paladins lost their -1 to wound. They're better at just like grinding away at holding an objective than being like a big damage burst source. I think you're better using Dread Knights for that. As far as the infantry goes, these guys are all very similar. They're 2-win models with a 2-up save. The battle line version is OC2, and they are 3 attacks at 6-2-2 with 3 attack on 3s in melee. The strike squad gets scout 6 and objective secured, and their OC2 battle line. The purifiers, and they get 1 heavy weapon per 5. The purifier squad gets 2 heavy weapons per 5. You generally won't take the heavy weapons on either of these profiles. They get the additional shooting profile and infantry profile I spoke about earlier. They get 2 heavy weapons, and they reroll 1s to wound or all wounds of the target's on objective. This rule is incredible everywhere it shows up. It's the Legionnaire rule, except it works in melee, so it's the best version of the Legionnaire rule. They punch well, they shoot well, they stand well because they're 2-up save, they're durable, they carry a character very well in the form of Crow. This unit is your bread and butter. Expect to see a unit of 10 in basically every army with Crow, and 2 squads of 5 is not a bad place to be, especially in Warpbane, where they have full hit rolls and full wound rolls almost always, as long as they're brawling over objectives. They are not cheap. 25 points a model is not excessively expensive, but they certainly are like a thing that you do have to be conscious of that. They are also only OC1, so if they do not kill the thing, they will often not flip the objective, and they do have a little bit of a strength problem. Strength 6 with full rules to wound is still only a 55% conversion rate. If you bounce into a vehicle with -1 damage or armor contempt or anything to that tune, you definitely could find yourself bouncing off it. But for the job, these guys are great. Purifiers trade out all of those bonus rules for movement 12 and the ability to fire and fade 6 inches after shooting. If you want to use these guys, you can re-embark them to transports. You can deep strike them and flip objectives. Really, really solid unit. They're fast. They're dynamic. Great little option. They're only 10 points more expensive than a strike squad, and they do a ton. I really do like interceptors. Fire and fading these guys in and out of a Rhino or a Razorback is a great way to just keep some repetitive damage on the board, and then eventually you can throw them away to go and move block or to go and charge something. Whatever you need to do, you can make that decision on your own time, because generally these guys will do their job for a few turns until you run out of a need for them. Then we have the Purgation Squad, which gets 4 heavy weapons in a 10-man, and it applies -2 to hit, -2 to move, and to charge to units it targets. The special weapons for Grey Knights aren't super great. It's like heavy flamers with strength 6, or 3 shots at 8-1-2, but doesn't ignore cover and like that. It's not quite the same tune as the heavy weapon version on the Dread Knight. So yeah, I think unfortunately just not the most interesting option. Yeah, by and large, I don't love the Purgation Squad, but all 3 of the other ones, the Strike, the Purifier, and the Interceptor Squad, are like generally really good at filling those gaps, to just kind of play the game with the army. They don't need much support. They don't need characters. They really do just do their job without needing any help. Apologies, sorry, my brain went to mush there. Okay, next up we have the vehicles, and this is the last section. Grey Knights don't really have much past that. 1 second. Okay, so we have the 4 Land Raider chassis. These are, or the 3 Land Raider chassis. These are unchanged from where you expect them to be. There is the Las Cannon one. There is the Hurricane Bolter one with more transport capacity and a bit more movement. There is the Big Flamers one that's a lot more expensive with more transport capacity. All of these are kind of bad. The Land Raider Redeemer is probably the most playable in Sanctic Spearhead. It drives forward pretty well. It shoots good. It has high OC and a 2-up save. And if you're willing to support it, it's totally fine. This is the one that I tried for the RTT. Driving it through a wall in Sanctic Spearhead was super cool. The ability to have that really good Overwatch is great, but Land Raiders are just not really super playable data sheets. They just don't do what they say on the tin, unfortunately. Then we have the Nemesis Dread Knight. This is another, again, same as the Grandmaster. It loses a few of the weapon options. It doesn't have the option of the flails, the mace, or the multi-melta, but you still run it with the Great Hammer, with the Psy Cannon, and the Heavy Incinerator. It shoots well, and it falls back, advances, shoots, and charges. It just plays the game well. It's dynamic. It's durable. It is high. It's got good OC. It's OC 4. These are, again, bread and butter. Unfortunately, I think these guys lose out a little bit from the Grandmaster getting a bit more playable. The free stratagem ability got buffed on the Grandmaster, and the reroll to hit, wound, and damage got buffed a little on the Grandmaster, and they're only 15 points more expensive while having different and usually better weapon options. The Sublimator being the Melta gun is generally a little bit better than the Inferno, the Incinerator, and the Grandmaster has that, and this one doesn't. So for the sake of that 15 points, you are kind of incentivized towards running the other one. It is not to say that it's at the exclusion of running this one. You'll definitely see some lists that are running more. Maybe you want 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and well, you can't do that with just the Grandmaster. The Nemesis Dread Knight is really, really great in that space. The advanced charge means that it is really good at playing on the board. It's really good at playing from rapid ingress. This data sheet's very powerful. It's one of the load-bearing data sheets of the Grey Knight army. As far as transports go, we have the Razorback and the Rhino. The Razorback transports 6, the Rhino transports 12. They both transport infantry that's not Terminators. The Razorback applies +1 AP to anything that targets the thing that it shot. I believe it's only for things that disembark from it. That works in shooting and melee. So you can get your Purifiers to AP3 on their shooting attack. You can get your Interceptors to AP1 on their bolters, and then you can push all your melee to AP3. Really, really powerful ability. 85 points. They hold the Las Cannon. The Las Cannon is a good little shooting profile. I'm a big fan of these guys. I think they do a job. They fill a gap, and we've seen some armies that are running these. And yeah, they also support Interceptors really well because Interceptors can fire and fade in and out of them. And yeah, what's not to love, right? Just repetitive, jumping in and out of a wall. You can come out 9 away from the wall, shoot, go back in, push out deep strikes, push your opponent's rapid ingresses back, stop them from attacking your objectives. And then eventually your Razorbacks can transition into being objective holders once you've dealt with your opponent's anti-tank stuff. Really, really solid. The Rhino gives a mortal wound aura of 6-up against Feel No Pains. 6-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. It's fine. They have to be wholly within 6. It's not even within 6. It's kind of depressing. I think the Rhino makes out really poorly from the Razorback being good. The Thunderhawk, the Stormhawk, and the Storm Talon are all flyers. The forge roll is 810 points. Don't worry about it. The Stormhawk does not have hover. It's an anti-air flyer. It's the same as it is in Space Marines. You're probably not going to run this. The same thing with the Storm Talon. It does hover at least, but its guns are not very good, and it's weirdly expensive. The Storm Raven, on the other hand, has insanely good guns: 2 Hurricane Bolters, a Plasma Cannon, Storm Strike missiles, multi-meltas, or you can run Las Cannons, you can run Assault Cannons, whatever you want. It's got a lot of guns with Twin Linked. A lot of guns with Twin Linked. Works really well in Warpbane, where you can give it full hit rerolls. It transports 12, and it's -1 damage. The Storm Raven is incredibly good. It works well in Sanctic Spearhead. It works well in Warpbane. Sanctic Spearhead lets it go through walls and advance and shoot. Warpbane gives it full rerolls, and It transports infantry really well. I think the Stormraven is very, very powerful, and I think we're inclined to seeing it, and you'll see it in some of the army examples that we'll be speaking about in just a minute, that it's very, very powerful. I think the Stormraven is one of the most interesting directions to take Grey Knights. It is obviously a very, very unwieldy flyer. The model is huge. It is difficult to move. You've got to play very careful angles with it, and it does not have defensive stratagems like it does in something like Ultramarine Stormlance. But in return for that, it does have really good damage and good stratagem support, and it transports generally better infantry, right? The Grey Knight infantry is in a better weight class than Marine infantry tends to be, because you tend to have them, right? Like, you're going to play Purifiers, you're going to play Strike Marines, where something like Blade Guard, that would be the kind of equivalent example, is more expensive, not as durable in the right senses, and doesn't necessarily want to go as danger close to Stormraven, or struggles from not wanting to get out of it, right? You're more than happy to jump a couple of Librarians and a Purifier squad out of a Stormraven and just shoot with them, and not feel too bad about it, deposit the Strike Marines, and it's less vulnerable to the Stormraven just wanting to drive forward. So I definitely think consider the Stormraven. We'll talk about a Warpbane list that's got them in just a second. Okay, let's talk about how Grey Knights are doing in the wider metagame so far. So overall, with I believe 4 weeks of data, Grey Knights have debuted a 44% win rate. That's not great. They are not doing amazingly. They're not far outside the balance window, but they are not doing incredible. 44% win rate is definitely on the lower end. I believe they're in the the bottom 5 armies in the game right now, unfortunately. Just not really making out like incredibly well. But they're not bad. They're not striking at like 35%. They're not Imperial Agents, right? I think that's a fair comment. Yeah, currently they're tracking as the fourth worst army in the game, above Emperor's Children, Deathwatch, and Orcs. They have an overrepresentation of 0.77, which means that they are representing in top 4s of events for every. They should be making up approximately 3% of top 4s. They are making up less than that, because that's what they are player population wise, is 3%. They should be making up roughly 3% of top 4s. They're making up 77%. So they're making around about 2% of top 4s, which is still pretty decent for an army with pretty low play rate, but definitely could be higher. It's generally a sign that there is not a lot of high level people wanting to play this army, not a lot of draw towards them. The strongest attachment is Warpbane Task Force, which is tracking at a 49% win rate. We then have Sanctic Spearhead at 47% win rate, Brotherhood Strike at 45, Augurium Task Force at 40, Teleport Strike Force at 39, and Banisher at 37, debuting as the worst attachment. It's also the second highest player detachment and the highest popular Codex detachment. In terms of play rate, they're 3% with 67 players across the last 4 weeks. The most popular detachment is Warpbane Task Force with 31 players, then Banishers with 21. Augurium Task Force had just 1 player. Very, very sad for that one poor guy who went 2 and 3. Banisher is definitely standing out as the one that like people are trying and is not having a ton of success. I would definitely recommend, if you're looking at Banishers, consider transitioning your army over to Brotherhood Strike. I think it's just a raw, more powerful detachment. But that's specifically if you're trying to play like a book style army. If you're happy to play Warpbane, you should probably just play Warpbane. It's the most popular, and also showing that it can maintain results that are within the balance window of 45 to 55%. Yeah, I think Warpbane is just by and large. Unfortunately, it does have 0, 4, and 1 event starts across our data set, where Brotherhood Strike has exactly 1. So, the only 4 no event start from the book so far has been from Brotherhood Strike. Okay, what do some sample lists look like? So I've pulled out 4 lists. 3 are from events that have already happened, and 1 is from an event that is this weekend at the time of recording. So we have Harley Scully's Warpbane Task Force list from the 6++ Grand Tournament. This list went 4-1 and finished for 3rd place. You can actually find a full event review from Harley on the 6++ channel, which if you just search for the 6++, there should be an event review there. It is a Brotherhood Librarian, Castle and Crow, 3 Grandmasters and Nemesis Dread Knights with Psy Cannons, Sublimators, and Great Hammers, 2 Strike Squads, 1 Interceptor Squad, a 10, a 5, and a 5 of Purifiers, and then a Stormraven Gunship. With Plasma and Multi-Meltas. This list is simple, to the point. It puts Crow in a 10-man squad of Purifiers, and it puts some scoring on the table, and then it throws Dread Knights at people. And I can't say fairer than fair. It does its job. The Brotherhood Librarian is a really solid piece to jump in and out of that Stormraven, just adds some extra damage, gives him a little bit of scoring. He's not running with a cat, he's just running by himself in the same way that we did, or the Granite players did with Librarians in the previous book, but just he's doing it with shooting now. So yeah, really interesting. I think that's a really interesting sort of direction to take if you're wanting to go down the rate of the Stormraven. If you're looking for a more traditional Warpbane army, you can look at Chris Fernandez's Warpbane Task Force list. This is from the Nova Open Grand Tournament 2025. So in 6 and 3, finishing in 33rd place, which was the highest performing Grey Knights of the tournament. This is a Brotherhood Librarian with Paragon of Sanctity, which is the point-click giveaway, give a unit Hallowed Ground. We have Castle and Crow, 2 Grandmasters and Nemesis Dread Knights with Psy Cannon, Sublimator, and Great Hammer, 5 Brotherhood Terminators, a Strike Squad, an Interceptor Squad, 2 Dread Knights, and then a 10-5 of Purifiers. So we're basically taking out that Stormraven adding in an extra Dread Knight and then a Terminator squad instead of one of the strike squads with the points saved. I think this works really well as sort of like just a generic, I want to play Warpbane, I want good rules that doesn't really do anything too crazy, and it seems totally workable, and congrats to Chris for going 6-3 with it at Nova, and finishing 33rd. Last up, we have Guillermo Lopez's. This is a list from Lavos Open 2025. It's a Brotherhood Strike list. It's the only list to have gotten a tournament winning position so far from Grey Knights. He did make the top cut at this tournament. He was 5-0 in the Swiss portion and then lost his top cut game. This is Castle and Crow, a Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight, 5 strike squads, 3x5 interceptor squads, a 10 and a 5 of purifiers, 2 Razorbacks, and 3 Nemesis Dread Knights. So going very heavy on the regular Dread Knights, valuing that advantage. I think this is a detachment that one of the things to look for is you naturally want to be up-downing a lot with a lot of units using that Gate of Infinity, but you have to have some things that are on the table, and Dread Knights do a really good job of that, but they're also very good at getting picked up if you need to, so you feel less pressured into having to pick them up because they still do something. They can advance in charge, they can use that onboard presence, and then we've got these 3x5 interceptor squads and the Castle and Crow squad that are playing a lot more of that sort of like dynamic push and pull, but we've also got those 2 Razorbacks to make sure that you're not pressured into having to do that, right? I think that works really well. And congratulations to Guillermo for his 5-1. And lastly, I wanted to pull out Reese Darville's list from the Goonhammer Open this weekend. Reese took the Sanctic Spearhead list that I took on RTD and updated it. We had a bit of a chat about it, so I wanted to shout him out. And this is Castle and Crow, 2 Grandmasters and Nemesis Dread Knight with Psy Cannons, Incinerators, and Great Hammers. 3x5 strike squads, 1 interceptor squad, 3 Nemesis Dread Knights with Psy Cannon, Incinerator, and Great Hammer, taking advantage of that 6-inch auto advance, and then a 10 of Purifiers and 6 Inquisitorial Agents to fill out some points. This list is playing much more simply. It's 5 Dread Knights and applying the hammer to people. You're using that speed to your advantage more so than the reliability. This army does less raw damage, but when it connects to you, it has that +1 to wound strategy, and it has much more ability to get on top of you. And I think that's the, and we will definitely do keep an eye on the Goonhammer Open at the weekend to see how Reese does. That is the end of my Grey Knight Codex review. Obviously, I think the Grey Knight book it's a little uninspired in some places. It feels like the fact that the Warpbane detachment is the strongest one is always a little bit of a letdown. You would like to see one of the Codex armies, Codex detachments come out and really feel powerful. If we jump back to the win rate data, right, having no Codex detachment to being above 47% win rate is a little uninspired, and it definitely feels like there is potential here for some changes to Grey Knights to come in the future that maybe gives them a bit more juice, a bit more agency over playing the game. But for the time being, Gate of Infinity is an incredibly powerful rule, the ability to teleport all across the board, and there are some incredibly powerful agents here in the form of Nemesis Dread Knights and Castle and Crow plus Purifiers, Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights specifically, that are going to do a lot of weight carrying. I think if you're looking at playing Grey Knights, consider the Storm Raven. It does feel like a very, very interesting direction to do something unique to Grey Knights that not all of the armies can do. Obviously, Ultramarine Stormlance has done the Storm Raven, but it's at some of its close to some of its best here with full hit rerolls all the time and access to some really good units to transport. Overall, I think the Grey Knight army is very interesting. If you're playing against it, keep an eye on those Dread Knights. Make sure you have a plan for Castle and Crow's ridiculous amount of ammo per unit. Remember that unit shoots 68 shots that will frequently have full hit and wound rerolls, and make sure that you've got a plan for that. If you don't, you're very likely to just get shot in the face. And yeah, remember to measure rapid ingresses. And for any Grey Knight players out there, hope you go second. I think that's the general rule of thumb for Grey Knights, right? Okay, I think that is going to do it for this episode. For anybody who enjoyed this content, if you want to hear more from me and from StatCheck, you can check out the StatCheck live show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. UK time at youtube.com/StatCheck. If you'd like to support us a little bit more, you can use the YouTube memberships in the link below, in the description below, or you can check out patreon.com/StatCheck. And if you'd like to work more with me personally, whether you're looking to play some Grey Knights or anything else, you can check out stat-check.com/coaching, message me on Discord, or drop us an email at coaching@stat-check.com. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more from it, let me know down below. Let me know what book you think I should have a look at next. Votan will be on the horizon. It's definitely one that I want to take a dive into because that book seems very interesting and very powerful. But after that, it's going to be kind of the Wild West. We'll have Imperial Knights and Drakari, and then maybe we'll take a look back the way. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Thank you so much. I've been Innes Wilson. I hope everybody has a great day. Catch you next time.